Welcome, everybody, to our industry update this month. I'm Jill Cox with Heritage Title. I'm here with Mr. Damian Cox with Cox Law Firm and Cox Education. And we're super thrilled to have Chris Gaddis, the president of Heritage Title, on our session today. Chris was recently promoted into the position of president. He was the vice president of escrow for the past several years at Heritage, and just been in the business for a long time. Very knowledgeable, great person. We're so thrilled to have him in this new role. And he's going to talk to us all today about escrow, all things escrow, things that we're running into, things that we think would be helpful for brokers to know to help your transactions go a little bit more smoothly, and hopefully answer some questions that are kind of hanging out there. He's prepared some topics that we'll dive into first, and then be thinking about any questions that you might have pertaining to escrow, and we'll be happy to answer those today as well. So with that, go ahead and turn it over to you, Chris, and we'll dive right in to the topics that you've prepared today.
Great, thanks, Jill. So yeah, we're going to talk about a few things that are on my agenda of just kind of some hot topics that we're seeing a lot in our industry. Some of them have to do with fraud. Some of them aren't fun topics to discuss, but they're important topics to discuss. So let's just dive into absentee owner fraud. I know this is kind of a hot topic on our side of things. I don't know if everyone on the call has heard much about absentee owner fraud, but by definition of how we look at it is an absentee owner is any closing transaction that we are conducting where the seller does not reside in the property. It could be vacant land, it could be that they've moved on, it could be an investment property, et cetera. So there are a lot of different caveats to what that looks like, but when their address doesn't match the property address, we consider that an absentee owner transaction. Just a few stats. I don't have exact numbers, but it has now moved ahead of wire fraud for fraud within our industry. So we have seen actually several of these come across our desk or closer's desk. And thank goodness, knock on some wood, we haven't closed one of these transactions. It hasn't gotten that far into it. But it has become very prevalent, more so than wire fraud, which is still a hot topic for us as well. So basically, in this scheme of things, the goal is for the fraudster to impersonate the seller or the owner of the property, typically to gain any equity. A lot of these properties are free and clear. It could be the seller or owner is deceased and they've somehow researched that, and so they're pretending to be the seller and they've stolen identification to look like the seller. We even have seen this, and not necessarily in our operation, but across the U.S. With some of our other companies, the scheme being done on a cash out refinance. So where they're pretending to be the owner of the property and they take out a mortgage that's a cash out transaction, and just try to fraudulently steal any equity in the property. Like I said, we usually see this on free and clear properties most of the time. I think it's easier, then they don't have to provide the social for payoffs and so forth. There are several red flags we look at with any fraud, and this mostly for absentee, but it could be for any transaction. We get some really strange things that come in. They typically include a very quick close or some kind of urgency that it has to be done like within a week or a few days. There's oftentimes maybe a large deposit if it's a buyer fraudulent transaction, a large amount up front. A lot of times it's maybe written on like a foreign bank account, or just a check that we don't really recognize. And it's usually like, I want to deposit $187,000 up front versus just a $5,000 or $10,000 earnest money check. So those are some red flags. Remote closing, they can't make it to closing. You've never met the person, we've never met the person, nor will we. But we need to close remotely, and I have my own notary. That's kind of a red flag for us. They're only available by email. There's no in-person meeting, no one's met them, the agent hadn't met them, the title company won't meet them, or there's no phone conversations that happen. It's all conducted by email, another red flag. Sometimes if the price or the sales price doesn't match really the market value of the property, maybe it's too good to be true, maybe it's too high, maybe it's too low, whatever that may be. Those may be some red flags too that we see. These red flags kind of start adding up pretty quickly. What does Heritage Title do to mitigate that fraud? We have several different things, especially referring back to the absentee owners. So we really flag every transaction and we look at every transaction as far as the mailing address. Does it match what the property address is? We utilize tools like Value Check and the county assessor's information to determine mailing address often, or if it's in the contract somewhere. We immediately send out a letter, and I can share my screen and show you what that looks like. Move this real quick. Let's see. Can you see the letter there, Jill?
Kind of. You got a spreadsheet behind it.
Oh, wrong screen
Yeah.
then maybe. Let me stop sharing. Hang on, that's the wrong screen. We send a letter out, if I can find it here. Well, let me move it over to that screen. How about that? Is that better? Do you see it now?
Not yet.
All
Oh,
right.
there
Well,
it
I'm
is.
not.
That's it. No, that was it.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
it just took it a second to pop through.
How about
Could be
now?
our internet.
Yeah, yep, there it is.
Okay, sorry about that. So this is a letter we send out on any transaction that we view as an absentee owner transaction. And this letter basically says, thank you for choosing Heritage. We're happy to be of service to you. We're working on your title commitment. It talks a little bit about fraud without, trying to scare the consumer too much, but it basically is a call to action to let us know and to confirm that you are doing this transaction and that, or if you have no intent of selling the property. So it's just kind of a way to notify who the information that we have that they're actually closing the transaction. Because I think this has really worked in many instances where we hear back from the owner that's actually the real owner of the property, that they have no intention of selling their property. They aren't under contract with the buyer. So this letter has worked in many instances for us. Timing is probably the tricky part, especially if it's a quick close transaction. So we use United States Postal Service when we have some time. If it's a quick close, we're sending these out usually via UPS, so that it's overnight delivery. But it's one of the tools that we first started using when this fraud started happening. I'm going to go back to my stop sharing
Chris,
my screen.
you mentioned that's absentee fraud, or I think that's what you're calling it. I remember this used to be a big thing with the vacant lands and the lots and everything else. Has it morphed? Is that what's going on here?
It has. It's much more prevalent. When we first were seeing this, it was mostly vacant land, and we would Google, and sometimes it looked like the contract would look like it was a house, and we'd Google, and we're like, there is no house there. This isn't your address. Whatever. So, but it's more widespread now, where they're utilizing any property, and a lot of times they are free and clear, but they're not always even free and clear. It's kind of all across the board now that they're kind of trying to attack where they can.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty scary stuff. So one of the other things that we use, we use a standard called Know Your Customer standard, and a lot of financial institutions use this, and a lot of it's just communication and asking questions. What we do is we call and ask our real estate agents. We have good relationships with the people we work with. And we ask them, have you met the seller? This listing, how did this come about? If we sense that there's something going on, we also may call and discuss with the property owner, and ask them some questions about the property. We try to use a trusted number for that. What can agents do? We've had several agents reach out to us and just say, can you do a little research on your end? I received this call about listing this property, but something didn't feel right. It was all via email. There was no phone conversation. So we can help with that too. We have a lot of tools in place. A lot of it's just discussion of like asking details about the property, gathering good contact information. We struggle with that a little bit of getting email and phone number. I think it's become more and more necessary for us as a title company to have some upfront communication with the customers. Sometimes we don't meet a buyer or seller until they get to the closing table. At that point, it could be too late, depending on how far we get into the transaction. Something else that we can use, and you could as agents too, is FaceTime or WhatsApp require kind of a video conversation or call. We also have a state-of-the-art identity verification platform that we started using. It's called MyTech. It's pretty cool software that does identification authentication of the person. It's really a kind of a two-step process. It does require that we have an email address and a phone number. It's easiest done on a cell phone because most phones these days have a camera on them. It does take a picture of their face, and that requires they upload a picture of the front and the back of their driver's license. With that, it then gives us a report back of, yes, it authenticated. We get kind of a green check mark that we're good to go. Or if it does authenticate, that where that face and that picture ID doesn't match, that it gives us kind of a red light on that. And I don't know exactly all the logistics behind it, but I know there's I don't know if it's Big Brother watching or whatever, but there's information there that tells us that yes, this is good or not. I know there are a lot of fake IDs out there. Anyone who has 18, 19-year-olds in college, I have one of those. Fake IDs are really good these days. They actually get them to scan and all this kind of stuff. This technology is supposed to really mitigate even fake ID information if they're trying to scan and upload to us a fake ID. It is supposed to be really good about identifying that is a valid ID or not. We do need their first and last name. We need to know what country they reside in. They need a cell phone with a camera, an email, and it needs to be a valid government issued ID. It can be a passport. It could be a driver's license. It could be a matricular consular card as well. So there's some different options there. Our process with that is obviously we need the information first to even send out the MyTech. It comes across as a link in your email and via text. It takes, I'd say like 5 to 10 minutes max to actually complete the MyTech. It sends them reminders if they don't do it. And we'll contact the seller ahead of time before we just send that out, because it looks a little spammy when you first send it. So we'll say, we're going to send this to you. We need to verify your identification, and kind of have a conversation with them about that. So like I said, it takes a picture of their face, front and back of the ID. We will take that information and we'll store that we got it all clear in our secure portal. In the MyTech portal, if you're concerned about privacy or sitting out there for too long, it automatically deletes after 7 days. So once the information is verified and you've uploaded a picture of your ID, it deletes from the MyTech system automatically. We use some other verification tools that other financial institutions use that can verify and look for matching email addresses, cell phone numbers, prior addresses of where they lived. So we use some different things to try to vet that we're talking to the right person as best we can. We understand that not everybody is comfortable with that technology. So if they don't have the means to upload or take pictures using a cell phone, and you can do it on your computer, but it's really easiest on the phone. We can do other things like have other conversations. We can request video calls in certain situations, or sometimes asking the customer to come in ahead of the closing and complete information with us, whether that be their payoff form that they're giving us, their payoff information. Sometimes we may ask of that too. I know it's not always possible, but we really try to use several methods to mitigate the risk here. If it's a remote closing, and we know that will happen, especially if you have an owner that's moved out of state and now they're selling their property, we do understand that remote closings need to happen. We have a sister company that does all the vetting of our notary publics for us. And in those situations on the absentee owner transaction, we require that one of those notary publics from our sister company actually conducts that closing. So they can't hire their own notary. They can't use their friend or attorney. Like, we want it to be someone who understands this fraud and who is looking out for verifying their identification, property, et cetera. And usually that scares people off, right? If they are trying to pull a fraudulent transaction and get it closed, that usually stops them kind of quickly, and then they just kind of go silent. You don't hear from them again. Remote online notarization, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, that is possibly another option, mostly because we use knowledge-based authentication, or KBA. as a tool that requires that they authenticate. So that may be another good option that we can use. Right now, we're really trying to push for using our sister company for notaries, and they have notaries all over the nation that can help out with closings for us. So again, some tools that we use to help protect the clients. MyTech, as we just discussed, it's a great tool. I've done it a couple of times just to test it and see how it functions. It's really easy to use. Any virtual meetings, FaceTime, WhatsApp. We also use social media. We may go on and do a little research on social media to look up the person and see. We just have to use a lot of different tools to kind of vet who we're talking to. Our escrow officers have a lot of sources and kind of know how to look for certain red flags, such as looking at county assessor websites. If we see that the address doesn't match, we may even call the county assessor and ask them when it changed. Was it recent, just prior to us getting the contract? Or looking at the title chain to review to see, when this property changed hands last. Looking to see with TLO, which is our people search engine, where we can look and see if they've changed addresses recently. You could see a lot of information about people, and a lot of financial institutions use this. And then just everyday communication of talking to our customers, asking non-intrusive and transactional or property-specific questions like, how long have they owned the property? We can verify that by looking at the chain of title. Did they recently move and just change the address again? We can check with the assessor and see if they've updated that information recently. Asking about physical details about the property. We've used Google to look at street views of properties to see, like, if they say they're the house and it's vacant land, there's no house there. I mean, we know that sometimes that's not always up to date, but it's a good tool to find out some information that just doesn't look quite right. We could ask them on a video call to show us a picture of their ID if they don't have the method or can't get the MyTech piece to work on their side. We also can compare signatures with some of the documents of record. That's one of the other things we look for. It's a little hard in a lot of markets because CTME contracts is so prevalent and the signatures are digital signatures, so you can't really match those up. But we may look at other things if there was a deed of trust or something, and we can kind of verify something that they've sent to us. We will look at ID information to see if we can match signatures up. We had one closer who had, I think within like a 2-month period, she had 4 of these come across her desk. One of them got back to us. She was a mail out and the documents came back to us. And that's when we kind of implemented that we have to use a specific notary because we didn't have that rule at that time. Someone was watching after us because we heard from the actual record owner that had received the letter that, no, I'm not selling my property, the day we were going to disperse. So it literally came down to the wire of last minute of the actual owner telling us, no, I'm not selling my property. So pretty scary there. But and why one closer had 4 and the other closers have had none, but it just tells you it's out there and it happens. One thing that I wanted.
Chris, oh, sorry, I was gonna just throw out another idea. I had a broker who was approached by a seller, something felt fishy. They wanted to figure out contact information for the actual seller. usphonebook.com is a really great website for looking up contact information for people. So you can actually punch in the property address, and maybe you were going to touch on this already, but it's a great way to look up phone numbers. And that's exactly what the broker did. They punched in the address, found the homeowner's name, called the phone number on there, and sure enough, they were not selling the property. So it just didn't even get to the point of listing. Yeah,
US phone books, we used to actually use that primarily, and then we've always had like one account for like TLO is what we use. It's what a lot of financial institutions use as well. It does similar to US phone books, but I think it's even more precise to the person. It will tell you what percentage of match that number and that email address is. It will tell you relatives. It will tell you how long they lived in certain places. And I believe it even detects like if that person is involved in fraud, that name has turned up before, it will tell you that this name may be a fraud attempt. It's a pretty powerful tool that we use. And, it's not a one size fits all with these tools. It's sometimes you look at a certain pattern of things to see to see that there is the fraud happening. Something else that I think, Jill, you recently shared this with your database is a lot of counties, when we started seeing this, we reached out to many counties, and they really didn't have any structure or rules in place on when someone would change someone's mailing address on the tax records. They sense now that this has become pretty prevalent, you as a homeowner can go on and with your county and most counties across Colorado, and you can get alerts sent to you. So if anyone changes anything on your account, it will email you that alert that someone's trying to change your mailing address or whatever it may be on your tax account. So it's a free service that most counties offer. So I highly encourage, as you're talking to your customer database, that this is an issue out there, and I think that's a good step to have an alert sent to you if something changes on your account with the county. On to, anyone have any questions on that, Jill, or you want me to just keep going?
I'll tell you, that's a different, that system's different than what it used to be, because it used to be you just called in and said change your address, and or do it online and type it in, and there was no security or anything else. So it's nice that they've at least started implementing something.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's many reasons why you'd want. I mean, obviously your tax bills will go to that address, and that's why we look at the timing of it. If it's something that's really recent, they may change it and change it back, which to me would be a red flag with the county. But I don't know that if they really are watching those things come across. But as the homeowner, you can get those alerts sent to you, which will be helpful, I think.
Yeah.
So on with remote online notarization, that's a great tool. I think it can help mitigate some of this fraud. I don't know how we use it. I can't speak for how everyone uses remote online notarization, but we require that anytime it's used for our company on any of our transactions, that KBA or knowledge-based authentication be used. Most fraudsters aren't going to know how to answer probably all those questions, and it is timed, so you can't research it all, and you don't know what the questions are going to be until you're in it. And it only gives you 2 tries, and then you are done. If you fail twice, then you're not doing a RON closing that day. So we found that out the hard way recently on a junior. We didn't know that they were a junior, and so they were getting their father's questions instead of their questions, and they didn't pass. So we learned a lesson on that. But it's a great tool. We see more remote online notarizations, mostly for seller sides. Getting lenders on board is a little more of a challenge, because they have to make sure whoever their investors are and whoever they're selling those notes to or whatever, that they accept remote online notarization. We are seeing more lenders kind of participate with different platforms. And it's not for everyone. I kind of joke and I say my mom's somewhat tech savvy. She has Facebook, which she probably shouldn't. But I would not have her do a RON closing. I think it would be kind of hard to walk her through those steps. But I think planning ahead, knowing if someone's going to be out of the country, we can do RON closings for most countries outside of the US. And we use them for power of attorneys. We use them for a seller side mostly. There are a few countries that for security purposes that we do not accept. I won't name all of them, but you can probably guess a couple of them. You can probably guess a couple of them. So we try to be really upfront, kind of vetting that person. Are they going to be able to conduct this? Do they have good Wi-Fi? If you have bad Wi-Fi and you can't keep a good connection, it's almost impossible to get this done. Strong Wi-Fi, a good device, computer or laptop. You could do it on a phone. I don't really encourage that, because if you're trying to look at what you're actually signing, it's pretty small. But that device must have audio, video capabilities. We do record the sessions, and we have to store that in our secure platform. Again, the signer must sign the knowledge base questions within a certain time limit. They only get 2 tries. For us, they must be a U.S. citizen and have a valid social security number, and that's required for the KBA, for the knowledge base authentication. We have 2 resources at Heritage. We have a department that will handle these for our closers. So we simply upload the documents. We send the request over to our department. They coordinate the appointment with the closing or with the signer and handle that for us. We also recently have 4 closers or escrow officers within our network that are our own closers that are RON certified. So they've gone through training, they have gone through the platform that we use and tested all of it, and we've done a lot of mock closings to just make sure everything works well for us. But it is a great option for us to use. And I feel like it's really secure. I mean, most people won't probably pass the knowledge base authentication if they aren't the real seller or person. So Ron, more to come on that. I think it's I during COVID we thought it would take off a little faster than it has. But we are utilizing it, and we do have closers that can do it internally for us, which is really great. So yeah, and then Jill, did you want me to talk about the seller association authorization? Do you want to share your screen
Why
and
don't
show
you
them?
want to ask some questions first, or?
Let's see here. Yeah, let's dive into just a couple quick questions. So regarding those fraudulent transactions, what does this mean for the real owners if the transaction does in fact close?
Fraud is part of our policy. So our title insurance policy. So if they, again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to give a specific answer here, but it would create a title claim that would then go on to our attorneys for review. Our hope and goal would be that it doesn't get to that point, obviously, but there is fraud covered under our title policy. So that would probably be a question for our underwriters. Thank goodness we've not had one at Heritage that's gotten that far and closed. But it's basically, I would think, unwinding the entire transaction and trying to figure out, is there recoupment of the funds that were either wired or delivered for proceeds. But it would have been a fraudulent transaction.
And then Dan had asked, he's surprised that there would be a payoff involved on these fraudulent transactions. He was under the impression the scammers search free and clear properties. I think you did touch on that a little bit, that typically they are the free and clear properties, but do we ever see these types of fraudulent transactions where there is a loan involved?
I don't think that Heritage has seen any of those, but I just know that what I'm hearing when we do kind of our corporate calls about this fraud is that it's not just touching just the vacant land any longer. It's touching a lot more transactions. So if they know that, for instance, like it's easier to get a payoff from a specific payoff lender, then they might send those through to us and just see what they can do. If their balances are low, if the seller's deceased, again, that's another target that we've kind of seen where they pretend, to be the seller. I think most of ours have been free and clear properties that we've seen come across our desk.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's it. Do you want to
They're
dive
trying to
into?
Yeah, they're trying to equity skim as much as they can without having to pay off a lender.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past anyone these days. We've seen there's a lot of fraud with even payoff statements that come into us. And so we have to verify all of those. So, if you get a fraudster who's involved, who can provide you a fake payoff, there's just a lot of things that happen that we see, and we try to catch all of those things, but there's always, they're always trying to stay one step ahead of us.
They seem to be getting more and more sophisticated too, because the first time I heard about this was the vacant land. I'm still trying to figure out, there's a house on it. I guess one of the tip-offs is going to be when they're selling it. I guess how do you get in the house to ever show? It's just, that seems
well. The
weird.
seller's only doing it to skim the equity, so there's no one ever going to the house. I don't know if they know that the house is vacant, and that's just where like a seller's deceased or something like that. Then they're just trying to skim off the equity completely, and
sell it to buyers with no inspection kind of thing. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we see a lot of crazy things, and I'm like, I never really understand, like when a buyer who's pretending to buy a property who really had no intention of buying the property. I don't understand that scam at all, but it happens. Or if they try. Can't really take a house and run with it, so I don't get it. So I think we want to talk, Jill, I think you added this to the agenda, the Colorado Real Estate Commission approved form, the seller association authorization.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of more of a reminder. We've talked about this before, but we call it the SAA. It's a document that can be executed. It's now in CTME as a document that can be done at kind of at any point. I think you can do it at your listing appointment. You could do it at the time of contract. But it's super helpful, and especially if you're trying to get information up front, it's good to get it done. If we don't receive the form, then we're automatically going to do it if you request that we order the CIC documents. The whole goal here is that by signing the seller agent authorization, that it allows a third party to obtain the CIC documents, the common interest community documents, on behalf of the seller without having to pay for them. We use a third-party service or vendor that charges for it, but they also vet to make sure that I think there's 21 documents on the required CIC list, and they actually do that vetting for us of making sure that everything's included, up to date as much as it can be. But that SAA form, the special seller authorization, association authorization, helps us that if we don't have to redo it and have it re-docu-signed, it just can speed things along a little bit. I think that one thing that people and we don't see what it looks like in CTME, but if it's there and you don't share it with us, then we never get that information. So if you're having it completed, but it's not being shared when you send the contract to your title company, we don't see that it was done at closing. So we're going to be asking for it again. So if you are doing the form, just make sure you send it to title or share with title, and we can use that form and quickly get those CIC documents ordered for you. Another thing that I think that we ask that people share that I think that people think we see on the title side is the contact sheet or contact information. I believe years ago this was kind of put in place with CTME that we don't see email addresses or phone numbers unless that information is specifically shared with title. We see if there's a transaction coordinator on a file, oftentimes they will send it to us, so we have good email and cell phone numbers, et cetera. But we don't automatically receive that information by receiving the contract. So we try to mitigate having to buy the CIC documents or have anyone pay for those by using the seller association authorization form.
I've been encouraging brokers to just add that to all your kind of upfront listing contracts. So when the seller is getting all those contracts anyway, that they're going through that mode of signing and filling out all those forms, include that SAA in there. So that's just all filled out and completed. And then it just helps prevent any delays for whenever you are under contract or approaching that association document deadline. You've submitted the contract to us, we're starting that order, but the clock is ticking. Now we're trying to contact the sellers and get the form signed. That there can be a delay that happens with that. Just in all your forms upfront at your listing appointment. That way it's ready to go and send it over with the executed contract. It just allows us to get that ball rolling that much faster for the association documents.
Absolutely. I think, a lot of these associations will take, 4 to 5+ business days to provide that documentation. So not having the special agency agreement or authorization agreement up front just kind of delays it a couple more days sometimes of us getting the contact information, sending it out via DocuSign, getting it back, et cetera. So it just speeds things along if the form is used. If you have access to CTME, it's just another great thing that they added to their document library that we can help speed things along. So I think
lastly, show everybody, Chris and CTM, where that form is.
Yeah, do you have it pulled up?
I do. Let me just show you real quick. Hopefully I pulled it up. Are you seeing CTM?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So when you're in CTM and creating your forms, if you guys scroll, you have to kind of scroll a ways down, and down here under DORA 2022 mandatory forms, here's that seller association authorization. It's about a 3-page form. If they know their login information for their HOA website, they can include that on the form. If they don't know it, they can put NA. But really the important part is just the signature on that form, the most critical part.
Yeah, the vendor that we use, third party, they oftentimes can use it without having login. There are some HOAs that do require it and they may reach back out, but there are oftentimes they just need that signature and they can proceed without login information or password information, which is helpful. Doesn't work for every association, but it works for many. Do we have a question you want to answer or look at before we go to the next piece?
This is the buyer scam, is what this one is the, the buyers with the, it's always, I always thought it was a Canadian cashier's check. Isn't that the infamous one where you get the Canadian cashier's check for the earnest money and then they terminate and then they want you to give them the earnest money back right away? And obviously that's one of the frauds that I think you see when the buyers are trying to get the money.
We've seen that, but we've also seen where they were going to wire the funds. Again, I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe they were doing it from somebody else's account.
maybe, or they're just hoping they get rich quick, win lottery, and all of a sudden they can wire the money to. I don't know, but we've seen it. I'm like, I don't understand that fraud. Like, if you wired to us, I mean, wires can't really be fraudulent. I mean, I guess you could have, made the money somewhere else and wired to us. But I don't know. I don't understand all these schemes, but they come up with some kind of crazy ones. But I wanted to talk quickly about secure portals, everyone's favorite topic, and kind of how and why they protect you and your clients. Most of the transactional documents that we send back and forth contain non-public private information, whether it be payoff information that we're obtaining, what their proceeds are, who their insurance company. There's a lot of information that we pass back and forth. Our goal is to have systems that protect the customer's information. I know most of us get overburdened by the amount of logins and passwords that we all use and deal with, but I kind of try to think of it as like dealing with your bank. Is that information secure? Most banks require dual authentication. If you're on Amazon, usually require some different things. Not anyone can just log into anyone's Amazon account. So our goal is we try to protect all the information that we possibly can. We've seen a lot of schemes where if we send a settlement statement out, they will make it look like they are us. Sometimes they will take that settlement statement, they will attach fake wiring instructions to it. It looks like it's coming from the closer. They'll maybe switch a couple little things, but they've gotten really, really good at impersonating anyone in the transaction, really. And so using the dual authentication just kind of helps our customers know if this is what their expectation is, that we're sending things securely, that you're not going to get just an email that comes from anyone and says wire me the money, and wire it quick. That's usually what another part of the scheme. We never email wiring instructions. We can use our secure portal that does require login, because it's not really an email, it's a link to the portal that then requires that dual factor authentication for the customer to gather that information. We still always ask that the consumer, whoever's receiving, especially wiring instructions, that they call us at a trusted number to verify the information. I just think you can't be too careful these days. We utilize a platform, it's called In Here, and we use that to communicate with the parties throughout the transaction. We've more recently started sending our title commitments that way, which we've received some feedback on, and we're working on, our goal is always to try to make that as easy as possible for anyone logging in to look at that information. With that, I think there's a whole lot of logistics that our company and other companies look at of anything that's kind of hyperlinked in documents that we send out. When they're clicking on those links, they're basically going back into our systems to see that information. So that's one of the reasons we want to make sure that it's secure, is we're linking customers back into our system, into our files. And again, there's encryption and all kinds of things that our security team works on with that. But there's a whole lot of reasons. There's many reasons why we send things securely. And it seems like, there's several banks that we deal with and lenders that every single communication we deal with is secure, whether it's I received this, thank you, you're welcome. All those messages come back and forth securely. And it's for good reason. So, Jill and any of our sales execs at Heritage can share more information about In Here. There is some really cool stuff coming down with that platform too, that will incorporate RON signings. For Heritage, we're part of the Fidelity National Financial Network. So you see all of your transactions with our sister companies as well. And there's some other, I think, some really cool tools, Breakthrough Broker. There's a lot of things in Here, and a lot of new things that will be coming. That's kind of like our end all be all platform for our customers. So watch for those new cool things to come. And if you need help with in here, reach out to your sales exec and they can help you with that. And that's all I have.
Well, we have one quick question. I think I might be better than one answer this. It was, do you know if the SSA is in DocuSign? I'm expecting that it probably is in DocuSign. The seller association authorization form is actually a commission approved form. And it's going to change next year. I know you guys are excited, but it's only like 2 words, so it's not a major change, at least at this point. But if you can't get it in DocuSign or any of the other providers, which I think all of them should probably have it, it is also available on the commission's website if for some reason you need to get it there too. So I just thought I'd throw that out since we had the question.
Yeah, and if we use it, if we are sending it from Heritage Title, we send it via DocuSign. We have it's templated where it fills out all of the blanks that they would fill in, so that we absolutely can accept it via DocuSign.
Great.
Okay, I think we'll just give it a second. Type any questions in Q&A if you have any burning escrow questions.
Burning escrow question.
Ask Chris or ask the attorney, anything we can help with, any issues you're seeing.
Well, I thought that was great, Chris. I cannot believe that absentee owner thing is now extending. That's incredible. So, and it's interesting to hear all the things that you guys are doing to check those steps.
Yeah, we have, I think it's like a 4-page memo from corporate on what we need to do. And again, it's, you wouldn't do all 4 pages, but I think you have just to get that comfort level that you're working with the real owner of the property. And we've done a lot of coaching with our escrow staff on what that needs to look like. And so I mean, my tech, I think it's really kind of hard to fool the my tech. We've actually had some of our employees who tried to do it and they failed. So I don't know if their face doesn't match their ID or what that is, but it's a pretty powerful tool that we've started using on all of these.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a balancing act too. You don't want to inconvenience people, but at the same time, you sure don't want to lose a whole bunch of money. So
right. Yeah, it's really not easy to undo or unwind a transaction. So we try to mitigate all that up front.
And that was actually another question. It says, do you, please repeat what happens to the owner if the property did sold by somebody else? And you talked about the fraudulent transaction, and I might step in it here, but I'm going to do it anyways. But, from attorney's perspective, obviously the buyer is going to have a title policy of some form or another, and that's how they're going to be made whole. But you can't transfer property from an owner if the owner didn't actually transfer it. So the owner isn't going to have that risk. What I always worry about is, these transactions are fairly quick as far as being found out that it's fraudulent. But my concern was always that you close one and nobody realizes it, and then the buyer goes in and builds a house and does all these other things and then finds out they got problems. Then, a seller could be stuck with a hole in the ground for where the foundation went in. But usually all that stuff comes up really quickly after the transaction if it ever ends up closing, because the fraudsters get greedy and they start looking for other transactions or doing other things, and it kind of shines a light on everything. But yeah, guys, it is a problem, and it is, I think Chris has brought up a whole bunch of ideas for you to think about when you're working with clients and you've never met them, about maybe we should look into this a little further. And I think contacting a title company to help you as a partner, Heritage, calling them, or Jill or one of your salespeople and saying, hey, I haven't met this person. It seems like it's real, but I'm not positive. And they can give you a whole bunch of those ideas that Chris just covered as far as making sure that you're not going to end up in a position, because obviously if something does happen, naturally the brokers have insurance, so they're going to get dragged in too. So it'll be all title company and the insurance, all the insurance will be there in one place. So
yeah, we do some other things, Damien, too, that you maybe think of this. We can flag in our title plant that property too, so that if one of our sister companies receives that same contract, because a lot of times if they can't get it done with us, they're going somewhere else. So we can flag that in our system and in our title plant, which is shared among most of the larger title companies. We can flag that so we see that a fraudulent attempt was made on this property. So it just kind of helps. Hopefully,
That's
forever
great to
now.
know. I know there's a property in Colorado Springs that I think tried to get sold 29 times. So
Oh,
might
yeah.
save broker a whole bunch of brain damage if they forewarn or call the title company to find out if has this been on the radar yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a question, Chris, and I think this would have been an interesting topic, and maybe we do this one on a future update, but regarding escrows. So she says escrows have been discouraged by title for years. What changed and what have your experiences been? You want to talk for a little bit about escrows?
No.
That looks like
Yes.
PTSD
Sure.
right there.
Yes, I do. I do. So when title, it's really not up to us 100%. So I think it depends on the circumstances. If there's been, a weather-related storm or something where the roof needs to be replaced, we don't really discourage the escrow. We have to get the lender to approve the escrow. So I think that's where sometimes we kind of get the rap that title said no. If the lender, and I don't know what they use for underwriting guidelines all the time, but if the lender doesn't want to escrow, then we can't escrow. So, and again, I think it depends on what it is. One thing we don't really enjoy getting involved in is there's an escrow regarding something that's a dispute, such as proceeds from a divorce. We don't want to get stuck holding those funds, and a lot of times there's not like really a date that ends the escrow per se. And then what if it doesn't? Then what? So I think it depends on what the escrow situation is. If it's like a repair of some sort, there are reasons why we do kind of want to be in handling the escrow. One is we're ensuring that the property free and clear of liens. So we want to make sure that that owner's policy, that there's no mechanics liens that will come about because of whatever work was done. So we would in those cases want to, but we still have to check with the lender and get their approval. We basically, everything that we do when there's a lender involved has to be in writing with the lender, because most of their instructions are pretty specific about, any disbursements that are being made in a transaction must be documented. They must be approved by the lender. But if it's escrows just because someone can't get along or can't figure it out prior to closing, those are really tricky for us to get involved in. And we try not to too often because we end up holding funds sometimes for many, many years without resolution, or they just get messy. And we're not truly an escrow company. I mean, we are a title insurance company who provides escrow services, but we get a lot of questions sometimes about, do you do just escrow? And it's really not our business to do just escrow. We insure and we close what we insure. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think that was a good answer.
Yep, great answer. Okay, so
That'd be fun. Let's do that one.
Okay, we had a question regarding the title waiver that came up this past week, waiving title insurance.
Yeah, and in the president's State of the Union address, they talked about. You want to mention, or you want me to talk about it? How do you want to do this, Chris?
Why don't I get my 2 cents a brief part without getting political on you here? But yeah, we heard about this a while back, and we heard that there was kind of a pilot program where they were testing this as some markets. Then we were told that the pilot program basically was a flop and it was not on the table any longer. And then all of a sudden it's mentioned in the State of the Union address. I think that the way it's kind of mentioned that title insurance is not worth its value of what the consumer pays, I think is misleading. When we pay out a title claim, we're not paying out what we collected for title insurance premium. We're paying out what the claim is. So, I don't know, with an attorney opinion letter, and Damien, you might be able to get some insight.
We probably ought to tell them what that title waiver is supposed to be, because I'm sure a lot of people don't even understand that. So what the plan, I guess, is, because they did this before where it was going to be an attorney opinion letter that essentially replaces title insurance, because you can get an attorney opinion letter for a lot less money. Which are there states that do that, Chris? Because nobody in Colorado I know that does attorney opinion letters.
Yeah, I actually bought an investment property in another state, and they tried to do an attorney opinion letter first go around, and then the lender said no. So I don't know if it's the lender that either approves it or doesn't. But me being in title insurance, I obviously am like I want an owner's policy, but the lender they tried to do an attorney opinion letter in another state, and it was a hard no
Yeah.
from the lender.
Yeah, my guess is that that's gonna, so for FHA, VA or federally backed, some of those, they might get through the lender a little bit because it's the government. But from my perspective, I don't know an attorney that would do these. It's just, it seems like, oh, I have a great idea. Why don't I just go ahead and take the liability and I have no money to pay for the claims if they come up? That sounds great, but I don't see this working. Just be perfectly frank with everybody. I just don't see a world in which that's going to be a replacement that somehow makes things more affordable for buyers on refinances. I mean, the title premiums are not exactly sky high anyways on these properties. So it's not like they're saying, what are we talking? They can save a couple $1,000 maybe, or
If not even
$1,500
that,
or
not even that, Dave. I
yeah.
mean, title premiums on lender transactions are fairly minimal, in my opinion. I think the other thing that really that doesn't is not addressed in the remarks that were made it's not just the policy or the commitment that we're issuing, it's the curative work that goes into that also, of cleaning up any prior title issues, making sure that the title going forward is clean, is a big piece of that. So I don't know, with an attorney opinion letter, does title just stay a mess and no one worries about anything out there? I mean, or you as an attorney that would do an AOL, an attorney opinion letter, would you clean it up?
Well, obviously not. I mean, I don't even think the statutes give us an authorization to do some of the cleanups. Like you guys can have some authorization within the statutes to, do releases, lien releases and things that attorneys would not have the ability to do to begin with. But even not cleaning it up, I mean, what am I going to go down and do a record search of the grantor grantee index to try and make sure that I mean, I it didn't make sense to me. That's all I'm going to say.
Nor did it to us. And it really, I think it caught our industry by surprise that it was supposedly the pilot program was a kind of a flop and it didn't work. And then all of a sudden it was mentioned again. I know our company's stance at this point is we will not close on an attorney opinion letter. We will not provide any closing services, recording services, or anything regarding any transaction.
How could you?
Opinion letter.
Yeah, how could you? I mean,
know.
you absolutely couldn't, because then when something goes wrong, they would be like, oh, well, you guys are an insurance company. Why don't you insure it even though you never got a premium? So that just doesn't even make sense.
And we have had one request to become on a vetted list or approved vendor list to do these. The other part is it is they limit our fees, which in Colorado, our fees are filed with the Division of Insurance, and it doesn't even follow our fee structure. So nothing about this really makes any sense to me, but again, I don't know. I mean, who does, if there's a lender claim on that policy, who do they go back to? Is it the attorney that did the attorney opinion letter?
It would have to be, wouldn't it? I mean, it would have to be, because they give an opinion letter as to title. Either that or the lender gets to eat it, which I guess is the feds at that point. Yeah, none of it makes sense to me. It'll be interesting to see if they actually, if that was it'll be interesting to see if they do something follow up further with that, or if it's just something that dies in the weeds now after it's been mentioned. So, but anyways, somebody asked, are we headed back to abstract? God, I hope not. What a disaster. You have to rely on the attorney. When the attorney's dead, you got nothing to go back to.
Yeah.
There was a question here, Chris, about title lock. The stuff advertised on TV. If you guys aren't familiar with this, it's advertised on TV. Make sure that you protect your property with title lock. Do you have a couple comments on that, or you want me to make them? Or
I mean, I could give you my opinion on it. Save your money, but and there's actually another. I can't remember the name of the company right now, but we've seen this come across where it's not Home Title Lock, but it's another entity that you can supposedly lock your title by recording a document, and you pay this company this ridiculous fee to do your first initial lock of the title, where they record this document that only they can unlock, supposedly. And you have to pay for a fee. So every time you lock and unlock, so if you need to do a refinance, you would have to pay them again to unlock your title, and they record something, and then you'd have to pay them again to lock it back.
I'm trying to figure out, what do they record? Do they transfer title to themselves so that you have to go through them? I mean, that's the only way I could figure that.
I can't remember. I would have to get with our underwriter and see. There was a sample that he gave me, and I'm like, we've seen it like once or twice, and I'm like, someone really paid for this. I mean, it was pretty pricey to lock your title and then have it unlocked, and for the homeowner to really not have all that control of doing whatever you need to do with your real estate.
Yeah, and the problem is, obviously you got the common owners. They just don't understand this, and I think brokers can help them with some of the ideas that you had as far as going to the county and finding those ways of controlling the fraud on their properties for not paying for some ridiculous thing that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think, not that everybody wants to log on to their county website and check their name, make sure it's all up to date constantly, but I mean, most counties have really good websites these days where you can check it occasionally, just especially as, everyone's taxes went up this year, right? So everybody was logging in and looking at their tax information with the county. You can log on and look and see, oh, my name's still here, everything looks good. That information, if someone tries to steal your title, whatever that looks like, would obviously change if somebody records a document.
Yeah. Anything else?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Answer everything.
That's all we have. So thank you everybody again for joining us this month. Thank you, Chris, for your time and expertise today. I do want to mention our industry update next month. We've got a return guest, Merck Patinas. He's always been one of our favorite speakers. He's a real estate litigator with a downtown Denver law firm. So he's going to be talking about buyers and sellers
Suing each other.
What he's seeing right now, and what brokers can do to keep themselves out of hot water and not be a part of that litigation. So Merck always does a wonderful job. So definitely sign up for next month. Whenever we close out today, it should redirect you to the login page. So sign up page for next month. So go ahead and register so you have that information on your calendars. All right. So thanks again for joining us, and we will see you guys in April.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.